So, welcome to Gardeners Growing Together Live. We are live here tonight, Monday, July 7th, and we have a very special guest joining us in our community tonight. Dennis is part of the Gardeners Growing Together community, but he also has his own community called Living Soil Community. So, I've been part of that community as well. I'm learning a lot there, and I'm actually still very in the dark on all the things that I should know and could be doing with my soil. But I thought it'd be great if Dennis could come on tonight and just give us kind of the basic 101 of what he does in his community, what, living soil's all about. And, so I'm just going to turn it over to him. And, as I think of more questions, I'll keep firing them at you. But first of all, what is living soil and why should this be something we know more about in our gardening?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say thanks for having me on, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you guys and share a little bit of knowledge with everybody, right?
Hmm.
And there's no sense in having knowledge if you can't share it with other people. So, um, I got started with a living soil by accident because I got into worms, right? So worms is really my business, and that's what I'm pretty much kind of an expert in. So I breed worms and I make worm castings, which is a soil amendment, and that is some of the products that I personally use and sell to other people. And this is what got me kind of started with a living soil. So I like to go down rabbit holes and know anything and everything that has to do with certain topics. And this is where worms kind of led me because everybody knows that, in the gardening world, worms castings are considered black gold, but nobody actually knows why is it called black gold, right? So I took a deep dive into that, and then I got into soil biology, right? And then I started using a microscope and got certified as a lab, and that took me on my living soil journey. And I thought I would share all of these things that I learned, and took me quite a long time to kind of understand because it is very different from the typical uh, growing situation setup or mindset that most people have. So without any further ado, let's talk about what is a living soil. Living soil is basically treating it as a living thing, as a living organism, right? And by doing so, we're really kind of neglecting the plant. Normally, when we talk about growing things and putting things in the ground, seeds or transplants and growing food, we're always looking at the plant and trying to decide, all right, the plant needs, what does the plant need? It needs sunlight, it needs water, it needs, it needs fertilizer, it needs, this, maybe the leaves are turning yellow and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm missing something. What does the plant need? When we look at a living soil, I neglect the plant completely. I don't really care what the plant needs because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a plant doctor. I have no idea what the plant needs. Just like you and I, if we were to go to the doctor, right? If we went into the doctor's office and the doctor just looked at us and then went back into his office, did some fancy things, came back and was like, hey, I appreciate you showing up today. It looks like you have malaria. Here's some malaria pills and some other things. Go home and you'll be okay. How would you feel about that, Tracy, if the doctor did that with you?
I'd probably go, really? How did you know that?
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing. We do the exact same thing with our plants, right? We look at our plants and the leaves are turning yellow and you're like, you know what? That sure does look like it's overwatered. I'm going to dial back the watering. Or you could say, you know what? I need some nitrogen because the leaves are turning yellow, so they should be green. So I'm going to give it nitrogen. But we do this with our plants all the time. We try diagnosing them just by looking at them. There's actual tests out there that will actually tell you what the deficiencies in plants are, right? So you can do a SAP analysis where you take the plant parts and you send it into a lab, and the lab will actually tell you what the plant is deficient in. And at that point, you've diagnosed the plant. You can give the plant what you need. When we're talking about a living soil, I neglect the plant. I don't pay attention to the plant in terms of feeding it specific things for what it needs. I will put the plant out there. I will make sure that it stays watered because it needs water. But besides that, I am focused on the soil. And a living soil is making sure that we have four principles: air, water, food, and microbes available in the soil, keeping those guys alive. Because when we look at the science that actually occurs in the soil, when we have those four things, plants thrive. And there's a lot of little intricacies with microorganisms and organic material and moisture and nutrients exchange and things that the plant is doing in the soil that we talk about in a community and that occurs in the living soil. And it gets really, whoops, I should probably turn that off. It gets really nerdy. This is the best way I can say it. It gets really nerdy and into the weeds. And now what I try to do is I try to break it down. Basically, what is a living soil? We're basically treating it as a living organism and making sure that it can stay alive. All living organisms need three things: air, water, and food. And that's pretty much what we're providing for a living soil. If we can do that, then if we put plants in it, guess what? The plants will pretty much grow all on their own without, us doing so much work or focusing on the plant. I guess that's the better way to say it.
So how do we know then if we have good living soil? Is there tests or something, or do we just, I'm sure that's something you can love to talk about. Yeah. So what's the next step? How do we know
Yeah.
if we have good living soil for our plants?
So if we take the four principles: air, water, food, and microbes, and we look at those because those are the things we need in a living soil, and we kind of break those down, we can kind of decide whether we have a living soil or not. So air, if you can't, if your soil is hard and you need a pickaxe to be able to get through it, there's probably no air, right? It's probably rock solid and there's no way for air to get through that. Additionally, or on the flip side, if your soil is so sticky that it sticks to your fingers and it's like clay, there's no oxygen getting through there, right? You can blow a bubble in silly putty because it holds everything together, right? Clay soil is the exact same way. So that's an easy way to tell you if you have a living soil or not. If it's rock hard, there's probably no oxygen. If it's super sticky, there's no oxygen. At that point, we've got no living soil, right? There's no oxygen there. Nothing can survive. Well, things can survive without oxygen or in low oxygen, but our plants are aerobic creatures just like us. They need oxygen to be able to survive and grow. The second thing is water. If you've got soil where you pour the water on and it just runs off the top, everybody's seen this. I know you've seen it, Tracy. I know Jim's seen it, and I know Mary Heather has seen it, and everybody else watching this has seen it. You pour the water on top. It doesn't matter how much you pour. You can pour slowly or really fast. It just whoosh. And then as soon as you go through it, it's completely dry. Well, if you have no water, you have no life. Just like us as humans, right? Every living thing, your dogs, your cats, they need water to be able to survive. And so do your plants. And so does a living soil. So if it's dry, hydrophobic, you probably don't have any microbes. On the flip side, it can be too wet, right? Sometimes we get into a situation where we have clay soils that just hold on to the moisture for days and days, and it's, again, super sticky. If it just holds on to moisture for way too long, it's just like a pool, right? There's some oxygen in water, right? But for the most part, if you stick your head in the pool and you try to breathe, you're probably not going to make it unless you have gills. Your plant doesn't have gills, and neither do microorganisms, right? So if it's sopping wet and floating in water, it's not a living soil. It's a cesspool or it's a pool, but you don't have the right microorganisms because we're looking for aerobic microorganisms that need oxygen. They need water too, just not that much water. So that's the air, water. We need food in the soil. There's some places where what we have is dirt and not soil, right? There's a difference there. And the difference is the availability of organic material. Organic material is food for microorganisms in the soil. And we'll talk about microbes here in a second. But we got to have that food in the soil. Most people think that when we're feeding a plant, we're feeding the garden, we're putting in chemicals, we're putting in, compost, we're putting in worm castings, bone meal, blood meal, seaweed, what is it called? Seaweed meal, kelp meal, oatmeal, all these other different types of meals. We're adding that into the soil and they think it's food. And it is food, but it's not food for your plant. That stuff is not available to your plant to be able to feed on, to be able to nourish themselves. We're missing one thing. So that's the food thing. The food thing is super important because we have to have that in the soil. In places like where I live in the desert, we have 0.4% organic material in our soil. That means we have less than 0.5% of food in the soil to be able to feed things. That's not good. Additionally, over time, organic material turns into dirt and it's no longer food. So sometimes we amend garden beds, we amend holes for our plants, right? But we don't keep amending. And we think that one amendment is going to last them forever. And that's not true. It's like you going to the grocery store and buying food. Once you eat that food, guess what? It's gone. You got to put more food in your refrigerator, right? The same thing goes for organic material on the soil, in a living soil. You got to keep feeding it. So that's the food source that we're talking about, organic material. And it can come in a bunch of different shapes and forms and sizes and everything else. And the last thing we need in living soil to make it living is microorganisms. So how do you know if you have organic material in your soil? Let's go back real quick because I need to talk about that. You can do a simple soil test with a mason jar, add some water, add a little bit of dish soap. You add your soil into that, you shake it up, you let it sit. You'll get the layers breaking apart. So you have sand, silt, and clays that'll break apart, and then the organic material, because it's lighter, will sit on top. And that way you can see how much organic material you have. Now, this is a very at-home DIY, not scientific way of doing it, right? If you do want to get a soil test, you can send it to any lab and they will tell you what the organic material makeup of your soil actually is. When we're talking about gardening on a large scale, we want to be above 5% organic material. I know it sounds like 5%. That's it. Yes, it's crazy. If we're at 5%, we are doing really good, and your living soil is going to be really happy. At 3, it starts to perform all on its own. Now, if we're under 3, that's where you're going to get some struggling and some issues occurring, right? So that's how you can kind of tell if you have organic material in your soil or not. Now, getting into microbes, how do we know if we have microbes? Well, if you don't have the first 3, I can tell you that you don't. If you don't have the first 3, you don't have any microbes. If you're missing any of the first 3, air, water, food, you don't have any microbes. You might have microbes, but they're not the ones that we want, right? Because we want aerobic microbes in our soil because our plants, again, are aerobic creatures. So if you're missing oxygen, there's no beneficial microbes there. If you're missing water, there's no beneficial microbes there. If you're missing organic material, you're not feeding any beneficial microbes. So we got to have those there. If you have those there in the right proportions, guess what? At that point, you probably have a living soil. Now, I say probably because you can have all of those things and still not have any microbes. It's kind of crazy. The only way you would actually know if you have microbes is if you sent it to a lab and you got tested. Somebody like me or anybody else that does biological testing, that's what you're looking for. They will be able to tell you whether you have the right microorganisms in the soil, the quantities of them, and if there's enough of them and the right types to be able to cycle the nutrients in the soil to be able to feed your plant. So that's how you can kind of figure out, how do I have the things that I need to be able to grow the plants that I want to grow?
So what is a microbe exactly? Like, what's an example of that? Or like, how can I see it? Is it a worm? Is it something else? Like, I need more. I don't quite get it.
Sure. Microbes is just short for microorganisms. And microorganisms is a term that defines many different types. Now we break these microbes into different categories, right? And I keep it very broad because it's kind of like different types of plants. Like we have a family of mint plants, but we have different types of mint. We've got spearmint, we've got peppermint, we've got strawberry mint, we've got banana mint, we've got leather shoe mint, right? We have all these different types, and the same thing occurs with the microbes in the soil. So when I test soil sample, I'm looking for 4 different types, 5 different types. So I'm looking for bacteria, which is everywhere. It's the most abundant thing on this planet, right? It's on the back of your fingertips. It's in your hair. It's on your nose. It's in your mouth. It's on your tongue, right? It's on your phone. It's on the soil. It's on your leaves. It's on your plants. It's everywhere. The next thing I look for is protozoa. And protozoa is a big category because it covers other microorganisms in that. And these guys feed on bacteria, right? So I'm looking for testate amoebas. I'm looking for um, flagellates. I'm looking for arcelias. I'm looking for different type of organisms in the soil. Can you see these with your eyes? Absolutely, you can if you have a microscope. If you have a microscope with the right magnification, then you should be able to see these. I do assessments at about 400 mag. So if you have a microscope that's capable of that, then you can see these as long as you know how to identify them. That's the other thing. A lot of people grab a microscope and they're like, yes, I got a 1000x microscope. I can see these microbes. And then they look through it and they're like, what am I looking at? What is this thing? I see something moving. And sometimes, a lot of the time, the microorganisms that we're looking at, they're not moving, right? Bacteria, they have brown motion. They literally just sit there and they shake. And you got to look really close to see them shake. Testate amoebas, they don't move. Arcelias, they don't move, right? They have they have little man, what are they called? Like tentacles that come out and they feed, but it's so slow. And when we bother them, they're not gonna show up. They're gonna go hiding, right? So you can get a microscope and look at these if you would like to, but with the naked eye, it's not possible. Another category of microorganisms that I like to look at is nematodes. Nematodes get a bad rap because of one specific type of nematode, which is the root feeding nematode or the root knot nematodes. These are the ones that most gardeners know when you pull out the plant and you got the roots and they look like they've got swellings all over the place. This is caused by root feeding nematodes. These are detrimental microorganisms, but they're one of 5 different categories of nematodes, and the rest of them are beneficial, right? So now these nematodes, they're pretty easy to see underneath the microscope. You can go to 200x and be able to see these guys squirming all over the place. They're really active. And you can see these guys there. Another category of microorganisms that I look at, which is super important, is the bacteria. Excuse me, we already talked about that, is the fungi. Fungi, they don't move, they're stationary, but they have very specific characteristics. And that's what I look for underneath the microscope to see where these guys are, measure them out, and see what they how they look, because they have very specific characteristics, just like all the other microorganisms. And then, of course, the last category I look at is all the bad guys. So I actually do go through samples and look to see what the bad microorganisms are, if you have any, right? Because some of them look very similar to our good guys, but there's small indications that that might not be very, it's very hard to tell sometimes, right? So those are the things that I look at. You ask, can you see them? Yes, you can see them with the naked eye if you have a microscope, if you know what you're looking for. Besides that, I think the only other thing I'm looking for underneath the microscope, there's a couple of other things, but they're not microorganisms. So those are the basic ones that I look at: bacteria, protozoas, nematodes, and then I'm looking at fungi as well. And then we do an assessment to see if you have all of those guys, if you're missing anybody, and then how do we get those guys back? And what do we need to do to keep those guys alive?
So is that what you teach and show inside your community, is how to, test your soil, how to amend it if needed, and kind of go through all those steps?
That's a great question. And I absolutely do not teach that. I do not teach people how to do biological assessments because it is very time consuming, it is very scientific, and it is very nitnoidy. If people want to do that, then they can go to the Soil Food Web and they get certified by themselves and go through that course taught by Dr. Elaine Ingham. But that is it's not easy. You have to be very deliberate, set time aside, and go through that course and make sure that you know what you're doing. I can tell you right now that if you want to go through that course, you have to score a 90 on each one of the exams if you want to pass. It is,
No,
it
I don't
is,
want.
it's quite, it's very difficult. I'm not gonna lie, and you have to set quite a bit of time aside just to make sure that you fully understand everything to a T. So I will not be teaching that stuff, but I do teach small portions of that. I will not teach you how to do an assessment. That's just
Okay.
that's too much. I don't think
Yeah.
the majority of gardeners care about that anyway. But what I do teach people is, what are the four principles of a living soil? How do we get those things in there? How do I keep my things alive so that I can grow the plants that I want? We talk about some of these intricacies and some of the calls that we have. I know people like Jim and Mary Heather like to ask very detailed questions, and I'm happy to answer those. It keeps me on my toes.
Never,
But
never. I would never do that.
but for the majority of our class and our course, I am teaching you the basic foundation of what a living soil is, how to get it in place, and then how to keep things going and growing the way Mother Nature does using science. So it's a different way to do it. We can dive into the nitty stuff, but I try to keep it very basic and surface level, because it can be quite nitty, and if we're diving into it, there's times where Jim has told me, I'm confused because you're talking about this, this, and this, but how does this fit into this, this, and this? So it can get pretty nitty. So I try to keep things very simple, very surface level, unless people want a deep dive. So no,
And you make it fun as well. I've been in your community,
yeah.
so you like to do soil games and just get people out there doing things in their garden. Doesn't have to be anything scientific. It's just the stuff
Right.
that we do normally, and just stuff that we, makes you more aware of kind of just having a look at your soil. Like I'm in garden beds now as opposed to in the ground. So
Mhm.
my concern is, do I still have all that stuff in those garden beds that more naturally show up in my soil? We don't have a lot of issues with, I think, living soil where I live, as far as I can see. There's always worms in there.
Yeah.
And, I've actually got a video I got to share with you one of these days. I took all my fishing worms from fishing, and I always bring them home after a weekend of fishing, and I release them into the garden and, let them burrow down. And I make worm tea from the castings that are in their containers that the worms are kept in. I don't know how long they're in those containers, but they're in some kind of dirt, and I'm assuming there's a bunch of worm castings in there. So um, I feed them at the lake all the time. I, give them all the scraps of whatever we ate that weekend, and keep them happy. And then, like I say, by the end of the summer, if they're lucky enough not to get eaten by a fish, they get to come home and live in my garden. So, yeah, so we're just for, for us gardeners, for the most part, I'm not, don't want to get in too deep into the science, but it is just to be aware, like you said, that,
Yeah.
it's not just the plant, it's what it's growing in that's important for sure.
Absolutely. And I think you hit it the nail on the head when you said just getting people out there and being aware, right? Sometimes it's not so much what do we need to do, this, that, and the other. Sometimes it's just going to take a look.
Mhm.
There's a lot of times where we get busy in life, right? And we throw plants in the ground, and then we kind of forget about them. And then we come back and we're like, what happened?
Mhm.
Why aren't you growing? Right. And it's like, well, it's kind of like a baby. Like you got to go check on it every once in a while, right? Like you can't just leave it there. Like that's neglect, right? Like if you would get CPS called, I'm not sure if that's the same thing in Canada, but you would get Child Protective Services called on you if you left your kid, right? Well, we do this with our plants, right? But yes, my community does do a lot of activities where we forcefully nicely force you outside to go look at your plants. Um, no, we have a lot of fun in the community.
Intensely. Yeah.
We do activities to get you outside, get you kind of looking at things differently. Sometimes we just look at the plants, but sometimes I want you to go out there and I want you to look at your soil. Sometimes I want you to look at the plants next to it. Sometimes in permaculture, the first principle in permaculture, right, is to observe, right? So if you put your plant on a patio and you get no sunlight, like your plant's not going to grow, right? So sometimes just getting out there and just observing what's going on and just being like, oh, I didn't know that it didn't get any sunlight. Or, man, the sprinkler it was getting everywhere except for this area right here, and it's dry. But if you didn't check that in the morning or maybe in the evening or in the afternoon, then you wouldn't have known that. And this is what we do in the community. I try to um, make it fun and make activities out of everything where we can go outside and kind of look at all these things. So you can just be really aware. And then, we drop these nuggets in the community. We have these little conversations about a living soil and how to keep these things alive. And then, over time, you kind of piece these things together, right? It's not like reading a book where you have to do it on your own or you have to do it in a certain time period, like a classroom. It's a self-pace, like come and go as you please. Take a little bit here, take a little bit there, put it together. There's people who have been in the community for quite a long time. There's some people who have been there for a very short period of time, and they could be on the same level, right, of comprehension, because some people just want to absorb everything at once, and some people are like, I got kids, I got a wife, I got dogs, I got a baseball practice I need to be at. So they have other things to do, and that's okay. So we try to make sure that, everybody can join in at different periods of time so that we're hitting a little bit of everything so everybody can learn at their own pace. But yeah, you're right. We do different activities to keep things fun so it's not so boring, right? This is what Skool is all about. This is the same reason you created the platform, right? Like everybody's been in a classroom where people are just talking to you and teaching you things, and that's boring. But PE is fun for most people because you get to throw balls at other people for dodgeball, right? You get to hit people in the head. You get to trip them while they're running, right? Not just joking, but like being active and doing things with other people. That's really, you know what I mean, where it's fun.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you. I don't know, Mary, Jim, do you guys have any questions or other things to add?
I do have a statement because when you answer the
Uh-oh.
question, you were like, no, I don't teach you all of that, but you do teach us how to cultivate a living soil and how to nurture it and how to take care of it. So maybe you don't teach us how to look and analyze our own soil, but you teach us how to make sure that the soil is alive and how to alter it if it isn't, or you're seeing that your garden will tell you it's struggling because things aren't growing, like or plants are biting it, or things are going wrong, and that's the sign that it's not, the ecosystem is not right in there. So I wanted to say that because I have learned a lot about how to keep things alive. Because before it would be like, well, should I do fertilizer? I don't want to spend a bunch of money on that, and then I don't know which one to get. There's like 70,000, But then I get into living soil, and that's my mindset, anyways. I'd rather use the natural way. I'd rather do a lot more natural stuff, and you've taught me a lot of ways to do that. So, kudos.
I appreciate that, Mary. And if I could just tag on to that real quick, you brought up something that's I think a lot of people don't think about. And when we're talking about living soil and conventional growing, right? It's kind of like growing natural and then taking medicine, right? So in a living soil, we're doing more natural, holistic things, right? Which is kind of weird, right? So if you got a sore throat, instead of going to go get the cough drop or Theraflu or whatever it is, you're going to go get honey, and I don't know what else can soothe your throat. There you go, mullein, and these other things. And these are the things that you're going to take, right? This is the approach we take with a living soil. When you start adding chemicals into it, right, or synthetics, that's where things get messed up, right, and out of balance because it's not natural. That's our body's not doesn't naturally take acetaminophen to heal itself, right? Like that's not natural. But we take these other organic things, and I take the same approach with the soil, right? We don't necessarily need to throw pesticides on our soil, right? Or herbicides. There's other organic ways that we can do it, because when out in nature, right? Outside of that window over there, when plants are growing, there's Mother Nature's not putting pesticides out, right? She's not spraying for weeds. They just don't grow there. And why is that? And this is kind of the stuff that we talk about in the community too. But Mary Heather hit it spot on. Like there is it's a different way of thinking about it. And there's a switch that has to happen. And hopefully in the community, sometimes that switch goes, and the light bulb comes on. And it's like, oh, that was the moment where I understood, like, this makes sense now.
So making your own fertilizers like I do, I make my compost tea or my worm casting tea, or doing some comfrey tea right now. Is that considered natural fertilizer to your, or is that part of enhancing your living soil, or is that considered, like, do you do that? I guess is my question. As you part of your
So I personally do. I personally do make teas, I make extracts, but I run these things underneath a microscope because I'm looking at the biology that's in it, right? I am not creating these things without looking at them. And the reason that I do this is because earlier we were talking about aerobic microbes and anaerobic microbes, right? When we're brewing things and we're throwing stuff in a container and we're adding water, and we don't know what we're doing. And most of the time, from what I've seen, when I throw it underneath the microscope, it's anaerobic. Now you're taking a sick product, right? In essence, because aerobic is healthy, anaerobic is sick, and you're going to put it on a sick plant. That doesn't make much sense. And unless you're running those things underneath a microscope to be able to see that it has the right microorganisms in it, we don't really know what's occurring. Now, in our community, we do teach how to make compost, how to make the right type of compost, how to keep it aerobic so that you have the beneficials there and not the detrimentals, right? I also teach how to make extract. I don't teach teas because unless you have a microscope and unless you know exactly what you're looking for, teas they're going to go bad really quickly. There's 1,000 different recipes out there. And I can tell you that if you're adding more than a teaspoon of unsulfured blackstrap molasses to your brew, it's going anaerobic. You're brewing bad guys. If you have aquarium bubbler on a 5-gallon bucket, it's going anaerobic. That's not enough oxygen for that amount of liquid that you're doing. You need a lot of oxygen. You need a lot less food. And when we're brewing teas, what we're specifically doing is we're brewing a specific type of microorganism that is lacking from our soil system. Unless you tested and you know that you went to the doctor and the doctor told you that you had meningitis and you go get the meningitis medicine, then you're good. But if you didn't go to the doctor and now you're just throwing malaria pills at it and you're throwing, I don't know, smallpox medication at it, you have no idea what you're doing, right? And so I do not teach how to brew teas because in order to brew a tea, you need to know what microorganisms are missing, what you are brewing for, and have the right equipment and a microscope to be able to identify when you've brewed the right amount of microorganisms for the situation that you're trying to rectify. So I don't teach that because it can go really bad really quickly. And the last thing I want to do is get people sick, and they're putting liquids on their plants and their edibles, and they're getting their family sick. This is how we spread salmonella, and we get all these recalls and stuff because something has gone wrong. So that is not something I teach. I do teach extract, I do teach compost, and I do teach vermicomposting. So that back to your question, is that something you do? Yes, but on rare occasions. I don't brew teas. Extracts I do on a regular basis, usually a couple of times a month, maybe once. In the summertime, it's usually a couple of times a month. In the wintertime, I don't. But that's just because the summertime needs more help here specifically.
Huh.
Oh, one more thing. When you're brewing teas, comfrey, when you're another thing that people brew is when they add liquid or they add organic material into liquid. One of these would be banana peels, right? People put banana peels in water, they soak it, and they're like, I'm gonna add, what is it, potassium to my plants. Here we go. Woo! Guess what you're doing? You're feeding the plant. You're not feeding the soil. So if the plant was deficient in potassium, now it's waiting for you to put more potassium into the soil so it can get its potassium. So it's relying upon you to keep doing that. So if you stop doing that, guess what? It's like a drug addict. It's waiting for its next hit. And if it doesn't get it, it's not going to go so good. So you have to keep doing that. This goes back into the synthetic and the chemical fertilizers. That is what they're based on, right? They're based on continually feeding this plant exactly what it, not exactly what it needs, but giving it what it needs when it needs it. And we're doing the same thing if we're adding these liquids, these, I don't even know what you want to call it, whether you add the banana peels or you add the potatoes or you take your rice water, right? We're feeding the plant. We're not necessarily feeding the soil system or the living soil.
Very good. Yes.
It's different. It's different. I know, Tracy.
Yeah, I know. My
I know
head's
what you're
going,
thinking.
oh no.
Yeah, I know. Everybody's head goes, oh my God, what is going on? What is he saying? I thought it was supposed to be good. Rice
Yeah.
water is organic. Why can't I put it? Blah, blah, blah. I get it. I get it. This is why we break these things apart and we try to make it really slow and digestible, because it is, at some point the switch will go blink, but until that happens, it's taking these small bits and pieces and digesting them over a period of time to let it kind of sink in. And then all of a sudden you'll be like, at some point it'll be like, okay.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm still learning, and I'm really interested in learning more. And I am going to share the link to your community, the Living Soil community.
Thank you.
Mary Heather also has a great community on Skool, so I'll do a little plug for her as well. And we have a really good, system going with. We all are into the gardening, growing world, but we all have different approaches, and there's lots to learn. And it's great that we can network with each other and share this information with each other and share it with our communities, and get them learning in all these different areas as well. So